You know what's strange? The smartest people in the room are often the loneliest. High IQ, impressive career, could probably solve a complex equation in their head, but ask them to sit with someone they love and just be present, and suddenly they're drowning. And it's not because they lack intelligence. It's actually because they have too much of it, but in all the wrong directions. Here's what nobody tells you. Intelligence doesn't distribute evenly across your brain. You can be brilliant at analyzing data and absolutely catastrophic at reading a room. You can understand quantum physics, but misunderstand the person sitting across from you for years. And once you understand why this happens, you'll stop blaming yourself for relationships that fell apart even though you did everything right. Let's start with something psychologists call the intelligence-empathy paradox. Counterintuitive research shows that people with higher analytical intelligence sometimes score lower on emotional intelligence. Not always, but frequently enough that it's not random. Here's why. Your brain has limited processing power. It's not actually unlimited, even though it feels that way. When you're someone who thinks deeply, analyzes patterns, anticipates problems 3 steps ahead, your prefrontal cortex is already running hot. You're essentially using up your cognitive bandwidth on internal narrative. Picture this. You're on a date. Your partner is talking about their day, but in your head, you're simultaneously analyzing what they said for deeper meaning, running through past conversations to spot patterns, predicting where this conversation is heading, wondering if you're responding appropriately, critiquing your own responses in real time, and planning what you'll say next. Your partner finished a sentence. They're waiting for a response, but you're in 6 different mental rooms at once, and by the time you actually respond, the emotional moment is past. The warmth is gone. What they needed was presence. What you gave them was analysis. Researchers at Yale published a study showing that people with higher IQs tend to spend more time in their own heads during social interactions, what neuroscientists call internal focus, rather than attuning to the person in front of them. It's not intentional, it's just how their brain defaulted to survival mode. Think your way through every situation. Smart people are essentially pattern recognition machines. It's what makes them good at their jobs, good at problem solving, good at spotting trends nobody else sees. But here's the problem. Relationships aren't problems to solve. They're experiences to navigate, and a smart person's brain doesn't know the difference. So when your partner says, "I'm fine," your brain immediately cross-references the tone they used, the micro-expression on their face, what happened earlier today, similar situations in the past, what fine has meant in previous contexts, and whether they're actually fine or lying. And you might be right. You might correctly identify that they're not fine. But then you do what smart people do. You try to fix it. You provide solutions. You offer logical perspectives. You want to solve the problem. But what they needed wasn't solutions. They needed you to feel understood. They needed you to sit in the discomfort with them, not escape it by fixing it. A therapist named Sue Johnson calls this pursuing and distancing. The smart person pursues solutions. The partner experiences this as dismissal, so they distance. The smart person, seeing the distance, pursues harder with more logic. The partner distances more, and the cycle becomes self-reinforcing. Smart people also have this tendency toward what's called certainty bias. Once they've analyzed a situation and reached a conclusion, they become very confident in that conclusion. So if they decide their partner is being unreasonable or avoidant or too emotional, they become certain about it. And certainty leaves no room for curiosity. Curiosity is what relationships need. I wonder what you're experiencing right now. Not, I've analyzed you and here's what's actually happening. Here's something specific that happens to intelligent people in relationships. They overthink everything. A normal person gets a text like, "okay," and moves on. A smart person receives that same text and their brain analyzes the punctuation, wondering why there's a period, considers tone, recalls similar texts, generates theories about whether their partner is angry or distant or losing interest, constructs narratives and plans responses. Should I address this directly or give them space? By the time they finish thinking about a 3-letter word, they've constructed an entire emotional architecture, and they're often wrong. Psychologists call this analysis paralysis, but in relationships, it's more like analysis catastrophe. You're so busy thinking about the relationship that you're not actually in the relationship. And here's the kicker. Smart people are often aware of their overthinking, so they create more rules. I'll wait 20 minutes before responding so I don't seem needy. I'll reread my message 5 times to make sure it's not misunderstood. I'll anticipate what they might think and adjust my response accordingly. More rules, more distance, more performance, less actual connection. What a smart person needs to learn is that relationships aren't problems with solutions. They're dynamic, living things that require presence over perfection, authenticity over analysis.
Intelligent people are often very self-aware. self-aware. They know their patterns. They've probably read psychology books about their attachment style. They understand their defense mechanisms. And this is where it gets really interesting because self-awareness can actually become a barrier to growth. Here's why. Knowing you have a pattern and changing the pattern are two completely different things. A smart person can intellectually understand that they're defensive, but understanding doesn't rewire the nervous system, so they become frustrated. I know I do this thing, why can't I just stop? The answer is because knowing isn't enough. Your nervous system doesn't care about your IQ. Additionally, smart people often use their self-awareness as a shield. I'm aware that I'm being distant, so I'm going to talk about being distant instead of being present. They talk about vulnerability instead of actually being vulnerable. They analyze their emotions instead of feeling them. A partner often experiences this as, you're still not really here. You're describing being here, but you're not actually here. There's a cognitive psychologist named Bessel van der Kolk who studies trauma and the brain. One of their key findings is that the body keeps the score. Intellectual understanding of your patterns doesn't change your body's response. Your nervous system was trained a certain way, often in childhood, and it doesn't update just because your prefrontal cortex had a realization. Smart people often expect themselves to be able to think their way out of relational patterns, and when that doesn't work, they blame themselves for not being smart enough, which sends them back into overthinking. Here's the deepest issue, and it's uncomfortable to say out loud. Smart people often use intelligence as a defense mechanism against vulnerability. Vulnerability requires not knowing. It requires uncertainty. It requires the possibility of being wrong, misunderstood, or rejected. And for someone whose entire identity is built on being capable and intelligent, vulnerability feels like falling. So, what do? They stay in their heads where it's safe. They analyze instead of feel. They explain instead of listen. They strategize instead of surrender. A relationship, a real one, a deep one, requires you to not have all the answers. It requires you to be confused sometimes. It requires you to admit you don't understand why you feel what you feel. It requires saying, I don't know, and being okay with that. But smart people often can't do that because I don't know feels like failure. So they end up in a strange position. They're intelligent enough to recognize that their relationships aren't working, smart enough to know what they should do differently, but not courageous enough to actually do it, because doing it requires stepping out of the thing that's kept them safe, their mind. What research shows is that the people with the deepest, most satisfying relationships are not necessarily the smartest. They're the ones who can tolerate not knowing, the ones who can sit in ambiguity, the ones who can feel without analyzing their feelings, the ones who can be present without planning. Here's what I want to say directly, because a lot of brilliant people carry this without ever examining it. Your intelligence didn't break your relationships, but the way you use your intelligence sometimes does. And that's actually the good news, because it means you're not broken. You're just using the wrong tool. You wouldn't use a hammer to paint a wall. It's a great hammer, but it's not the right tool for this job. Intelligence is extraordinary for so many things, but for relationships, what you actually need is presence. Presence means listening without preparing your response, feeling without analyzing your feelings, being uncertain and being okay with it, letting someone else be right sometimes, admitting you don't know, sitting in discomfort without fixing it. None of these require you to be less intelligent. They require you to be differently intelligent. And here's the beautiful part. Smart people can learn this. You're capable of extraordinary neuroplasticity. Your brain can rewire, but it doesn't happen through thinking about it. It happens through practice, small moments of presence, choosing to stay in your body instead of your head, choosing to listen instead of analyze. The relationships that work for intelligent people are the ones where they finally give their mind a break and just show up. You probably came to this video because you've felt this pattern. You've watched relationships fall apart despite your best intentions. You've been told you're too much in your head or too analytical, and you internalized it as a flaw. But your intelligence isn't the problem. The problem is that you've never been taught that the most intelligent thing you can do is to stop thinking and start feeling. That presence is more powerful than analysis. That I don't know is sometimes the most honest and brave thing you can say. Smart people change the world through their minds, but they change relationships through their hearts. If you're someone who recognizes themselves in this, the work isn't about becoming less intelligent. It's about becoming more present. present, and that's something your brilliant brain is absolutely capable of learning. If this resonated with you, please subscribe. And if you want deeper support in actually rewiring these patterns, not just understanding them intellectually, there's something in the pinned comment that might help. It's structured to move you from insight to actual change, because awareness without action is just another thing your brilliant mind loops over. Thank you for watching, and remember, the people who love you don't need you to be the smartest person in the room. They just need you to be here.